Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here with Dennis. Dennis is in the Guinness Book of World Record for being the first pro gamer. So before we kind of kick into the meat of stuff, let's talk about that. Like, what was that like? What was the first thing you won? Tell us about being the first pro gamer.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the differences, obviously there's a few 100 million people that are into it now that weren't into it back then. But I would say probably the beginning of esports that most people point to is when I won John Carmack's Ferrari in a Quake tournament in 1997. So it was a long time ago.
And was that like at the time orders of magnitude more than any other tournament, or were there other tournaments of similar? What was the scene like from a?
Yeah, I mean the scene was small, right? I mean you're talking about maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people total that played these kind of games. Because the one thing about esports that is necessary is that you need people to be able to appreciate what you're doing on screen, and in order to do that, you have to have played these games. And so that was kind of the early days of online gaming as a whole. So obviously there were not that many people into it. But I mean, I had an agent. I was making over 100K a year back when I was 16, 17.
And it was all sponsorships and
all sponsorships. I would get paid to make appearances and stuff. So that was definitely super early. And then after I retired, there was kind of a lull where there was no real big pro gamer until Fatality came on.
And why was that? Why do you think it stopped not getting more popular after you won a Ferrari?
I mean, the challenge back in those days is that you didn't have the kind of support that you got from the game developers and publishers that you now.
Okay.
I would say Riot was really, when people ask me, well, who was largely responsible for the success of esports, I would actually point to Riot because, I remember when I talked to the founders of Riot, who are friends of mine, they were investing, $1 million a year in esports, and then 10, and then 20 the next year, and then 50 the next year, and then 100 million the next year, right? And they treated it as a marketing expense initially, a way to basically build virality around their games, and it worked. And so back then, I won a Ferrari in a Quake tournament, but it was not given to the tournament. The tournament didn't buy it.
Right.
The guy that actually put it up was the guy that made the game, and he donated it as a prize.
Right.
And so, a lot of it was just grassroots support. People trying to rile up Intel or Nvidia to get them to give us $10,000 or $20,000 to sponsor a tournament. Right. Whereas now, obviously, there's a lot bigger money involved.
How big of a role has obviously Twitch played in this whole ecosystem of esports? Do you think this would have happened without Twitch? Would it have happened differently, or is that kind of one of the big? You got League of Legends. Is that the other stool?
Yeah, I would say actually it was both Twitch and Riot kind of building off each other, right? So Riot obviously put a lot of money into building the league itself, supporting the players, providing salaries for guys when at the time you could barely make $1,000 in these games, let alone I think the starting salaries were $30,000 that they gave them. And of course you need an audience, and an ongoing audience, and an ongoing narrative, because the most successful sports today, they build a narrative over a season that makes you kind of invested in the players, invested in the storylines that are being built over the course of a season. And so Twitch kind of helped with that as well. And of course it's the players in the community themselves. They realize that esports is not just about competition, it's also about entertainment. And so, I think everything kind of just converged at the same time.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned to me in the past, which I thought was interesting, is the games have changed too. Like esports, the certain games lend themselves more to esports formats and consumption. Talk a little bit about what makes the games today more similar to sports, for example.
Yeah, I mean the games back when I was playing, multiplayer was an afterthought. Right, so the first real multiplayer game that was competitive was probably something like Doom, and then Quake after that. Whereas now, obviously, almost every game is, multiplayer is at the core. The online competition is at the core of a lot of the gameplay. So I would say that's one difference. But also, the games that are popular today are all team-based. Back when I was playing, it was all basically they called them dueling type of games where it was one-on-one. And I think the team aspect of it adds a lot more flavor and interesting elements to a game compared to a dueling type of game. You have a lot more personalities. Obviously these games also have different roles that you can play, equivalent to the point guard in basketball and the center and stuff. And, every single person has a personality that, and a role that they kind of are drawn to based on their personality. And so like, there's a lot more places that you can find yourself kind of investing in because there's people that are like you or play the roles that you like to play.
And speaking of this analogy with quote-unquote traditional sports like basketball and football, how do you see this ecosystem evolving from teams and leagues? Does it become the NFL where, if you talk to Activision, they're creating the Overwatch League and they're franchising different teams and cities and have investors from all kinds of celebrities and sports teams? Or does it become more of a grassroots things where, teams start forming around games, they build their own leagues and, they become kind of the ecosystem themselves? How do you see this bottoms up versus tops down view of?
Yeah, I mean, esports is weird, right? Because, up until now, most of the value in esports has accreted to the publishers themselves, right? I mean, they are a marketing vehicle for these games, and that's where the people that made the most money so far in esports have been the game developers, Riot Games, in particular. But I mean, that's obviously changing, right? I think now, you have the Riot Games, the LCS, you have the Overwatch League, and I think there's a Clash Royale League that's launching soon. But it's weird because no one owns a game of football, but someone owns League of Legends and someone owns Overwatch. And so I think fundamentally the biggest challenge in esports today is trying to figure out how to ensure that all the elements, all the key players in the space, in the sport, are successful. Right, so there's, the Overwatch League, I think the franchise fees are now $45 million or something like that to buy in. Like, they have to, Activision itself has to ensure that those people that are buying in for $45 million make their money back. But the reality is when you actually look at most of the esports teams, I think only the top two are even profitable. Like other than TSM and Cloud9, most of the other teams don't make money today and haven't made money today. Like all these guys have lost a lot of money investing in esports. And so, fundamentally that's a challenge now. If you look forward, there's obviously a lot of potential there. I would say the thing that people are most excited about is the gap between revenue per fan of esports compared to most professional sports. There's a huge gap there. But it's an interesting challenge. I mean, yeah. I mean, what about you guys? I mean, with Accel, are you guys investing in teams?
We've looked at a lot of the teams and even leagues from an investment perspective, and it's a little bit outside of our scope in terms of what we look at. Historically, we've bet on either the games themselves, Clash of Clans, Rovio are examples of companies we've invested in, or we try to find companies in the ecosystem that are platforms. So in the esports world, we're looking at companies, startups that are either helping the consumption of this new genre, or people that are trying to publish, and tools that help you monetize. And I think one of the more interesting areas that we've been spending a lot of time in is tools and platforms that help gamers become better. Because unlike traditional sports where there's only a few people that can actually make money playing games, if you look at the number of streamers out there that can generate a living, it's a much larger audience, right? And those people all have appetite to be better and pay for games. And that's an area that we're spending a lot of time in. Obviously, the reason why we're an investor in your company plays. So we think there's going to be a lot more interesting areas around that too. So I think for us, I think we're believers that leagues, the games, are going to exist on their own. And to your point, they're not all going to work. And the ones that generate the right ecosystem, the right balance of economy is going to be the most successful. But around that, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for startups to exist. But speaking of plays, is what you did as a gamer the inspiration for Plays.tv? And maybe you can talk a little bit about Plays.tv.
Yeah. So the one thing that I think everyone knows me, all of my friends, they know that I'm just the most uber competitive guy. Any game that I play, I have to be at the top. It's top 100 in Clash Royale, it's top 100 in PUBG. And the thing that always frustrated me is a lot of my friends would come to me for advice, but it's really hard to teach somebody how to play, even when you're looking over their shoulder. And so, one of the things that I've always tried to do is to try to build a platform or a tool that help people actually get better. Like, are there stats, is there data, are there videos that you could show people to help them actually level up? And in doing so, saved me a lot of time because I have dozens of friends that always come to me for advice in a lot of these games. So, that was really the genesis of the idea was, can I build something to kind of help my friends get better?
And speaking of kind of helping your friends get better, do you feel like this is going to be traditional sports, has a couple key, LeBron James, Lionel Messi, but in the esports world, a lot of the most popular people are not the best players or the best streamers. And how do you see that world evolving? Is it going to be a world of really popular streamers that make most of the money, or is it going to concentrate around a couple of top players that get all the sponsorship, get all the dollars?
Yeah, what's interesting actually is that some of the best players in the world, like if you take Bjergsen, who's on Team Solo Mid, who's probably the best player in North America for League of Legends, he doesn't stream. If he did stream, he'd be making probably something like $6-7 million a year. And he chooses to take a $500,000 a year salary because he just wants to win. He wants to compete. And he knows that he could be making a lot more money. And so there's basically this world where, because streaming is not really, if you look at the really successful streamers on Twitch, they're not just good, they're also really entertaining. Right. And the way to think about Twitch and live streaming in general is that it's a stage, it's a performance. It's not necessarily about skill.
But does that take away from the gamers, the real gamers, so to speak? Or do you think that's good for the ecosystem to have a bunch of really entertaining people that aren't necessarily good at the game, popularizing it, and making a ton of money? A lot of these streamers make a couple $1 million a year.
Yeah, no, I don't think it takes away from the game. Most Twitch is kind of TV's, the analog to television for the new generation. It's just entertainment. You're not necessarily always looking to watch the best player. Sometimes you just want to sit there and just, watch someone funny, as an example. But I would say that actually most of the top streamers are also highly skilled. Maybe they're not quite at the level that, to be able to compete at a true pro level anymore, but they're definitely up there, for sure, yeah.
And how do you think, how's mobile going to play into this? This has mostly been a PC-based ecosystem. Now there's obviously some interest around the PlayStation, Xbox console side. Is mobile going to become bigger, the same, different from an esports perspective?
If you had asked me that question, I don't know, 2 months ago, I would say mobile's probably still, at least 18 months, if not 24 months away. But with the launch of Fortnite and PUBG on mobile, I would say those are, Clash Royale is kind of straddles the line, but I would say PUBG and Fortnite are the first 2 games that I've seen on mobile that are really competitive and potential have kind of esports potential. Clash Royale to me, I know they're trying, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think even as a hardcore Clash Royale player, I don't really find it that interesting to watch. And I think the thing is just the controls are handicapped on mobile. The games aren't quite as deep traditionally, but as I said, I think PUBG and Fortnite and maybe like Arena of Valor or some of those games that are coming from China have the potential to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got less than a minute here. So just so I don't waste time playing this game, but what game are you playing? So I don't have to worry about wasting time getting my butt kicked by you.
I was playing PUBG pretty religiously for the past probably year. It was kind of the way that most executives in gaming, that's how you network now. You hop on a game together, you hop on Discord, and you just, PUBG, the first 20 minutes, you're just looting. Yeah. So like when you're looting, you just shoot the shit, and basically you're just catching up with people, other executives in the space and other entrepreneurs. But I would say the tipping point from PUBG to Fortnite was kind of when Drake played with Ninja on stream. And so now you just saw all this huge exodus of PUBG players switch over to Fortnite. So now I'm on the Fortnite train.
We're out of time. Last question. Will you ever get back into competitive gaming? Is there a comeback? Is there a Tiger Woods comeback we should look out for?
I'd like to think that I never left. As I said, I still play very competitively. But if you're talking about like pro circuit, I think I'm just too old for that now.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Cool. Thank you.